the panel, I really have a very specific question about a specific subject. One of the hazy questions that surrounds Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda is really its relationship, if any, with Iraq and with Saddam Hussein. We've often heard that Osama bin Laden would not have been a natural ally for religious reasons for the composition and nature of Saddam Hussein's regime. And our staff report, as you just heard, basically says there's no credible evidence of any cooperation between the two. However, there seems to be some indicia that there may have been, and Mr. Fitzgerald, I'm delighted you're here because of this. The first question really I wanted to ask specifically to you, because it relates to the indictment that of Osama bin Laden in the spring of 1998. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is before the U.S. Embassy bombings in East Africa, and the administration indicted Osama bin Laden. And the indictment, which was unsealed a few months later, well, let me read the indictment. The part of it says, excuse me? I don't know.
Just talk right in the speaker.
Is that better? I'm sorry. The indictment reads, al-Qaeda reached an understanding with the government of Iraq that al-Qaeda would not work against that government and that on particular projects, specifically including weapons development, al-Qaeda would work cooperatively with the government of Iraq. So my question to you is, what evidence was that indictment based upon, and what was this understanding that's referenced in that?
And the question of the relationship between Iraq and al-Qaeda is an interesting one. I don't have information post-2001 when I got involved in a trial, and I don't have information post-September 11th. I can tell you what led to that inclusion in that sealed indictment in May, and then when we superseded, which meant we brought in the charges in the fall, we dropped that language. We understood there was a very, very intimate relationship between al-Qaeda and the Sudan. They worked hand in hand. We understood there was a working relationship with Iran and Hezbollah, and they shared training. We also understood that there had been antipathy between al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein because Saddam Hussein was not viewed as being religious. We did understand from people, including al-Fadl, and my recollection is that he would have described this most likely in public at the trial that we had, but I can't tell you that for sure. That was a few years ago, that at a certain point, they decided that they wouldn't work against each other, and that we believed a fellow in al-Qaeda named Mamdouh Salim, Abu Hajr, the Iraqi, tried to reach a sort of understanding where they wouldn't work against each other, sort of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that there were indications that within Sudan, when al-Qaeda was there, which al-Qaeda left in the summer of '96 or spring '96, there were efforts to work on joint, acquiring weapons. Clearly, al-Qaeda worked with the Sudan in getting those weapons and the National Defense Force there and the intelligence service. There were indications that al-Fadl had heard from others that Iran was involved, and he also had heard that Iraq was involved. The clearest account from al-Fadl as a Sudanese was that he dealt directly with the Sudanese intelligence service, so he had firsthand knowledge of that. We corroborated the relationship with Iran to a lesser extent, but to a solid extent. And then we had information from al-Fadl, who we believe was truthful, learning from others that there also was efforts to try to work with Iraq. That was the basis for what we put in that indictment. Clearly, we put Sudan in the first order at that time as being the partner of al-Qaeda. We understood a relationship with Iran, but Iraq, we understood, went from a position where they were working against each other to standing down against each other, and we understood they were going to explore the possibility of working on weapons together. That's my piece of what I know. I don't represent to know everything else, so I can't tell you what we've learned since then. But there was that relationship that went from opposing each other to not opposing each other to possibly working with each other.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Not unrelated, later in 1999, the Congressional Research Service published a report on the psychology of terrorism. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that report, but it's a 178-page document. But there was a passage about possible al-Qaeda attack on Washington, D.C. and it said that, quote, could take several forms, and it had various scenarios. One of the scenarios is rather chilling because of this, and I'm quoting again, suicide bombers belonging to al-Qaeda's Martyrdom Battalion could crash land an aircraft packed with high explosives into the Pentagon, the headquarters of CIA, or the White House. End of the quote. Another passage in that same report says, if Iraq's Saddam Hussein decides to use terrorists to attack the continental United States, he would likely turn to bin Laden's al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is among the Islamic groups recruiting increasingly skilled professionals, including Iraqi chemical groups, weapons experts, and others capable of helping to develop weapons of mass destruction. Al-Qaeda poses the most serious terrorist threat to U.S. security interests, and for Al-Qaeda's well-trained terrorists are engaged in a terrorist jihad against U.S. interests worldwide. Now, I would appreciate brief comments, and we're really very short on time, of the panel as to is there validity to that report? And secondarily, in your view, in addition to what you've helped us with, Mr. Fitzgerald, is there any evidence or any indicia of cooperation and support on the side issue of whether it's Iraq?
Sir, I think the staff statement, we are in full agreement with the staff statement in terms of the Iraq-Al-Qaeda relationship at this time. It is an issue that we aggressively pursue in tracking down all new leads to try and deepen our understanding of what that relationship might have been. But I think the staff statement did an excellent job of representing what our current understanding of the relationship.
What's your current understanding of it?
Yes, sir. But every day we are tracking down new leads that come out on this topic aggressively.
Mr. Pistole?
I agree with the staff statement also. There is substantial information about new threats, but in relating back to the report that you referenced, that information has been out there. I don't recall when I first became aware of that, or when the FBI, I can't even speak on behalf of when somebody became aware of that information, but clearly we've been aware of al-Qaeda's interest in targeting specific areas as was carried out on 9/11. The issue of where we go from here is better described in a closed setting, which I'd be glad to provide at any time.
Well, thank you. We would appreciate that. Anyone else have any comments?